Okay. Hello, class. Good morning. Happy New Year. We are continuing with our class on COS 101. Today we are looking at the topic computer hardware. So, on the screen we have our objectives for today's lectures. First of all, we'll explain what computer hardware is. Then we'll try to distinguish between external and internal hardware components. Go ahead to describe various computer hardware, different storage devices that we have, and finally we'll also try to compare these different storage devices. So let's start. What is computer hardware? As you can see, computer hardware can be described as an umbrella term that refers to the physical components of a computer. Computer hardware can be classified as either internal or external. And when we talk about internal and external, that has to do with the placement of that physical part of the computer, either in or around the device. So I don't know if you're already there with us. I want you to pick a piece of paper, and then the next slide where we'll have basic components of the computer, try to classify them as internal or external. This is what I mean. We have drawn this in class and we have explained these devices. Now, I want you to just exercise yourself and try to identify these devices, which ones are placed inside the CPU and which ones are placed outside. That will give you a picture of what we mean by internal or external components of the computer hardware. So let's now do it together. Yeah, that's another screen now. Internal hardware components and external hardware components. So if you look at the internal now, we see that motherboard belongs to the internal hardware component. RAM is internal, hard disk is internal, SSD, solid state drives, is also internal. These things are normally seen inside the system unit. Then on this side where we have the external hardware components, you see the monitor, the mouse, the keyboard, the printer, and the speaker. Okay, so we now try to look at some of these things in a more a little bit more detailed form. So generally, internal hardware is required for the computer to run. So most of those devices that we classify as internal, you see that without them, the computer cannot run. They are devices built into the motherboard or added as an expansion card or device to the computer. This means that the motherboard connects all the other components. So these internal components, most of them are placed. The motherboard itself is one of the major internal components, and then other internal components are placed on the motherboard to also help the computer to run. That's why we say that internal components, they are required for the computer to run. They are housed inside the computer casing. Examples include the processor, the memory, the RAM, the ROM, the video card, and then the hard disk and others. Okay. So then external hardware components, they are devices that are added outside the computer case. They are external. They are added, connected to the computer case externally. External hardware enhances the use of functionality of the computer. Most of them are also called peripherals. These hardware components provide input and output to the computer so users can communicate with the system. Okay, that is their major work. We have discussed input and output devices. So in this class now, we'll concentrate on the internal hardware components and the storage devices, because some of those input and output devices that we've considered, they're also computer hardware. Most of them are also external, externally connected. So we're concentrating on the internal hardware components and then the storage devices. Okay. So what are we looking at now? You see the casing, the system case. That is the first thing you see, because that is the house for most of the other internal components. We say the system unit is the case that holds the internal hardware components used to make desktop computers operate. That is the house for most internal components. They are used to mount items such as the motherboard, hard drive, optical drive, some cards, and all that. Okay, the RAM, the ROM, all of them. Most computer cases come bundled with a power supply. Okay, so most times you don't install the power supply. Most cases, most computer cases come with the power supply embedded in it. So computer cases for desktop computers also contain external ports to connect external hardware to the internal components. So they have the ports from where you will now connect this. And most if you look at the back of the casing, you see those openings of different shapes and sizes. Yeah, they are the external ports from where you can connect the external hardware to the internal components. All right, so this is a kind of inside view of the system unit. So what can you see? You see the power supply that is part of the casing. You see, you may not see it very, very clearly anyway, but at least having a picture of what the inside of the casing looks like. The fans, the CPU, the video cards, the motherboard, data cables, hard drives, CD-ROM, all bundled inside the casing. Okay. Now, let's pick them the much we can, one by one. That is a bigger view of the motherboard. Bigger view. I don't know if you've seen one before. If you have not seen a motherboard before, actually that's what it looks like. Okay. So say that the motherboard is a circuit board used to mount several other essential hardware components, including the CPU and the main memory. Motherboard link hardware units and their functions together to enable the computer processes to take place. So as I see it, most of these openings, slots, and that is where you connect many things. Just like we saw in the previous, all these things you're seeing that is like they are packed full inside the casing. Actually, all of them have one place or the other where it's connected onto the motherboard. The motherboard is sitting flat on this casing you're seeing. The motherboard is sitting flat while all these other components are connected to it. Okay. Next, we have the central processing unit. That is the processor. So the processor is the component that executes program instructions by fetching instructions, executing them, fetching another instruction, executing it, and so on until it encounters an instruction to stop. That is exactly what the processor does. The program executor of instructions. So it fetches instructions. Everything that the computer does for you is they did it by executing instruction. So anything at all that the computer does for you, it achieves it through execution of several instructions that it picks one at a time. Pick, execute, pick, execute, pick, execute. And processors are characterized by their clock speed. For example, Intel Pentium 200 of 1990s the CPU has a clock speed of 200 megahertz, you know. So the speed of electricity is generally measured in hertz. And this means how many, that is a hertz, means how many cycles the processor completes uh, in, per second, okay? So how many is able to complete, you know. So that is how the speed of electricity is measured. It's measured in hertz, okay? So what does it now mean? It means that 200 megahertz speed means 2 million cycles per second. Okay? How many cycles it completes in a second? Okay, so that is 200 million hertz. That mega there stands for million. Okay, that mega there stands for million. 200 million cycles per second. So that will tell you why computers, and this is actually quite small compared to the kind of speed we have today. Because today computers, however, have their clock speeds measured in gigahertz. And giga means billions of hertz. This is why computers operate with enormous speed. Intel i5, i7 processors have a clock speed that is between 1.2 gigahertz and 3.6 gigahertz. You understand what that means? And then that is the upper limit, 1.3 gigahertz to 3.5 gigahertz, respectively. That is i5 and i7. And newer generations are having more. Okay, so that's why computers operate. That is the main characteristics, the speed. Most times that this one is operating a higher speed than the other, this one is operating a higher speed than the other. So we now see where it comes from. Two popular processors are Intel and AMD. These are the two popular processors that we have. Okay, now what else do we have in the processor? So one of the most important components of the processor is the buffer memory, also called cache. It's a memory within the processor located very close to the processor core. And why did this cache? What is the essence? So in the 80s, computer become faster while memory access hindered additional performance increase. When the speed of computer is increasing, but accessing memory, because for computer to operate, it must be fetching instructions and executing it. So that memory access hindered computers from performing at their utmost speed. So that was what led to the development of a processor cache. So basically a cache is a fast type of memory. The main purpose of a cache is to ensure that the processor has immediate and instant access to the data it needs in the right order. Okay, so that is the essence of the cache. That's why we say that it's quite important. Memory component is a buffer, processor buffer memory, that helps us to have immediate access to the data that it needs at any point in time. All right, so that's that. So we'll now move to storage devices. We have seen the motherboard, the processor, and the cache memory. Storage devices, they are hardware components used for storing, porting, or extracting data. And we have two main types: the primary storage and the secondary storage. Okay, primary storage devices known as internal memory or main memory. You can call them internal memory, you can also call them main memory. These memories are directly or indirectly connected to the central processing unit via a memory bus, and it holds program instructions, data, and intermediate results. So the primary storage also hold the intermediate results, program instructions, and input data. The CPU continuously reads instructions, continuously read the main memory to pick instructions stored there and execute them as required. It is generally smaller in size than other bigger storage devices. Okay, examples of primary storage include the RAM, the ROM, and the cache. We have already seen the cache. Cache is a buffer memory that is comes with the processor. Okay. Now let's look at the RAM. What is the meaning of RAM? Random access memory. That is the name, just the name. Okay. Random access because you can write to it, you can pick things from it, you can pick from store, you can read, you can write, you can. It's a repository for both program instructions and data manipulated by the program during execution. So whenever the processor wants to execute any instruction, maybe that instruction is saved, is on the hard disk or any other storage device, the first thing that it does is to pick that data or instruction from that repository to the RAM. So that from the RAM now, it will have easier and quicker access. Because picking instructions from, say, the hard disk slows it down. Remember, just like what you explained that led to the creation of cache memory, is also something like that, but this time around, is not, the cache is quite smaller. The RAM has been there and is also bigger. But somehow, fetching from the RAM is also taking, in as much as it's in close proximity with the processor, but it also has some little delay when you compare to cache. But every instruction that will be executed must be picked from whichever source where it is to the RAM, because it's from the RAM now that the computer will now be picking instructions, executing, picking instructions, executing until it's done. So it is seen as the working area of the computer. RAM is divided into cells, with each cell having unique address. Everything that is stored in the computer is stored in an address, and the RAM is measured by the number of bytes it contains. That's why when you talk about your small storage devices, you'll be talking about gig. This one is 2 gig, this one is 16 gig. Maybe the size of your flash, your hard disk, the memories, your memory card, any storage device at all that is being used by the computer, the capacity is measured in bytes. Then you have the kilobytes, the megabytes, the gigabytes, as it increases in size. Okay, so and typically 1 kilobyte is equal to 2 raised to power 10 bytes. That is 1024. So 1,000 for storage devices, because it's stored in binary. So each 1,000 is not just 1,000 like that. Each 1,000 is 1024. That is 2 raised to power 10. Okay. Then the next one we'll look at is the read-only memory, ROM. ROM means read-only memory. This memory is used as the computer begins to boot. You must have observed this. Small programs called firmwares are often stored in ROM, like the BIOS chip. These instructions are used by the computer to perform some of the most basic operations required to operate the hardware device. ROM memory cannot be easily or quickly overwritten or modified. So some codes, firmware, programs, scripts, instructions, that are needed by, these are just different names that you can call different types of program instructions. So written for the computer. So some of those codes that are needed by the computer may be to boot up, to perform some basic operations, and all the basic input outputs that are stored in this ROM. As we said, ROM is read only. The program has been written and they are stored there. So all that the system is doing is just to read what is contained there and execute it to do what is expected to do whenever called upon. And that is the ROM memory. You see the picture there. See the picture there. Quite different from the RAM picture. You see RAM, you can anyway, not you, the maybe maintenance engineers, they can add more, they can change it, they can increase the capacity. But ROM is almost fixed on the motherboard, so you don't really need much to do on it, except when there is having a serious problem and needed repairs. Okay, so that is that for primary memory, primary storage devices, or main memory. These are different terms referring to the same thing. So if you are now asked, you can say the three of them: the RAM, the ROM, and the cache memory are the primary three things that can be classified as primary storage. Now let's move to secondary storage. Secondary storage is a memory that is stored external to the computer and are not directly accessible to the CPU. It is mainly used for permanent and long-term storage of programs and data. Computers usually use its input-output channels to access secondary storage, and the examples include hard disk, CD, DVD. All right, let me explain. So we said that secondary storage, they are for external storage, they are for long-term storage. You know, they are not like RAM, they are not like cache. They are for you, the users. We use it to store our files, store our pictures, store our video, store data that just to want to keep. It's mainly for the user. No, it's mainly for the user. The other three we looked at is mainly for the computer. It's the computer that understands what is using it for. But for our own, we normally use secondary storage for permanent and long-term storage in our hard disk, in our CDs, in our DVD, and other devices. Okay, so let's look at some of them. Let's just look at some of those storage devices. The first one, most popular, that must always be there, is the hard disk drive. This is the most popular data storage device. For my business, a hard disk, a portable and affordable storage device are available in different shapes and sizes, with storage capacities ranging from megabytes to terabytes. Okay, and that is the picture there. So it's always there in our system to store our files and other things. Then the next one is the flash memory device. Flash memory are cheaper and portable storage devices. Is the most commonly used device to store data because it's more reliable and efficient compared to other storage devices. That is when we talk about removables, the ones you can, they are quite, reliable. We use it a lot. It's also known as USB flash drive, and includes a flash memory. In fact, it contains a lot of things because in that flash memory, you have the USB flash drive. The drive is there. The memory itself is there. The USB interface is also there. So with it, just need it you plug it directly through the USB port, and then you'll start reading or writing to it. So we can directly connect these devices to our computers or laptops and read write data into them in a much faster and efficient way. These devices are portable and their sizes ranges from 1 gigabyte to 256 gigabytes generally. Okay, solid state drives, SSD. Solid state drives came out in 90s. Solid state drives use a type of flash memory that is faster, takes less space. Because of what it uses semiconductors to store information by electrical current uh, changes in the circuit. And so because of these semiconductors that are being used, it makes the SSDs to be faster and to be a kind of smaller. It takes less space. It does not contain optical disc inside it like the hard disk and don't need moving parts. When you saw the picture of the hard disk, you saw the handle, the moving part that is also used to read the disk. So in solid states, you don't have such. So these are the things that some of the advantages that made it to be smaller and then to be able to also contain more. Applications for solid state drives are smartphones, tablets, high-end laptops, two drive desktops and solutions and that. So the need to have a smaller, more portable devices actually led to this, because with bigger hard disk, you see that even the hard disk alone is bigger than the biggest smartphone. So definitely it will not be used. So you're now start looking for smaller storage that will still have a capacity that be able to carry the apps and the different things that needed to be stored. So solid state drives became a very good option for those smartphone and tablets, smaller computers. Okay. Advantages and disadvantages. Solid state drives, they are reliable, durable, increases better time, requires less power, doesn't make noise, generates less heat, they are lightweight, and has 10 times faster read write speed as compared to hard disk. But they also have their downside. They cost higher, they have limited capacity in the drives because of the cost. So the one you get that will be almost the same price with a hard disk, then the capacity must be much smaller than that hard disk. The limited chances to write. Frequent reading and writing to it can actually make it to degrade faster. So because of the way data are stored inside it. Okay, so these are the advantages and disadvantages of SSD. Okay, SD cards, that's another storage device. You know, the SD cards, they're generally used with electronic devices like our phones, digital cameras, etc. to store larger data. They're also portable. They have sizes 2 gig, 3 gig, 5, 8, 32, 64, and all that. Okay, to run a memory card on a computer, you require a separate memory card reader. Okay, with smartphones, they normally have the slots where you can fix it. If you want to run it in a computer, you need a card reader, memory card reader. All right, the CDs, CD, DVD, Blu, Blu-ray technology. These are, they look, come in their own shape too. See, these are external devices. Can use it to store our audio or data files, software data. Normally they compact in CDs. DVD can be readable, recordable, and writable, any one of them. Okay, so recordings can be done on such devices and then can be attached to the system. While Blu-ray technology that used to read a disc from blue violent laser, in which the information is stored in greater density with a longer wavelength. This makes it hold much more data than DVD. Okay, all right. So having looked at these storage devices, both the primary storage devices and then the secondary storage devices, what are the differences between them? The differences can be grouped into four: their size, their data retention, the location, and the example. So for size, primary storage are smaller, secondary storages are larger. Data retention, primary is temporal, secondary is permanent. Location, primary storage are normally internal, stored in the casing, while secondary storage can be internal or external. Like the hard disk is internal, it's normally kept inside the casing. Examples for a primary will have RAM, ROM, cache memory. For a secondary, we'll have hard disk, compact disk, and all that. All these things we have looked at. Okay, so in summary, what have we looked at? I've explained what computer hardware is. I've also distinguished between external and internal hardware components. We have described various internal computer hardware components, such as the system unit, the motherboard, processor, the primary storage, and then such as RAM, ROM, cache. We have also described the secondary storage. We looked at the hard disk, looked at the solid state drives, SD cards, compact disc, DVDs, and Blu-ray disc. And finally, we compared these storage devices based on four uh, criteria. That is the size, the location, just like we did here, data retention, location, and then examples. So that is what we did for today. As a review questions, can look at this. With what we have done today, we'll be able to answer these questions. We'll be able to explain what computer hardware is. We'll be able to differentiate between external and internal hardware components. You can also give examples. You should be able to list and discuss various internal computer hardware components. You can describe storage devices. And you can also compare different storage devices. We'll also be able to differentiate between three primary storages, that is the RAM, the ROM, and the cache. You should be able to differentiate between them. So if you're able to answer these questions well, of which I know you can from what we have done today, then you have actually understood today's class. All right. So thank you. Remain blessed, and remember, Jesus truly loves you. As he loves you, he also longs for you to love him too, by giving your life to him and living daily by his instructions. Thank you once again, and remain blessed. I don't know if there is any question. I don't even know. I've clicked on stop record. Okay, stop.